Oregon's new to the Big 10. Is it a two-horse race with the Ducks and the Buckeyes? It's a Locked On crossover edition right here, right now. Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time for a special Locked On crossover edition. Locked On Ducks, Locked On Buckeyes. I'm Spencer McLaughlin. That is Jay Stevens. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This is your daily source to stay up to date with the Ducks or the Buckeyes if you're listening over there. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. I wanted to do this little shindig with Jay because going into the Big 10, Oregon is the new kid on the block, but they appear, at least according to the betting market, poised to run in and just start winning at a very high level. They, along with Ohio State, have got the highest win totals in all of college football, with Texas and Georgia being the only other teams that are at 10.5. Let's start with this in the context of 2024, Jay. Is this Ohio State, Oregon, and the field sort of feel in the Big Ten?
Absolutely. You have to take into account that they're not the only team coming in from the West Coast in the Pac-12. Washington is going to have a new quarterback and new coach. That's going to be very interesting to see and to figure out how that thing meshes. UCLA just stole Chip Kelly from the Los Angeles there in Southern California. That's going to be different. And I'm not even all in on Lincoln Riley and USC being dominant in this upcoming season in the Big Ten for USC. So, yes, to me it is. Michigan, new head coach, lost a lot of players, had a lot of guys get invited to the Combine, which it's weird for me to say this, but good for them. Like, you had a lot of good players. Good for them. I don't think Penn State's going to be there. I don't think Michigan State's going to be there. Wisconsin, Iowa, Purdue, Indiana, miss me with all those teams. I do think it is Oregon, Ohio State potentially playing for the Big 10 Conference Championship in the upcoming season.
They're going to be the two favorites, certainly, when you look at the national championship odds. We don't have Big 10 title odds just yet, but I think that the Ducks and the Buckeyes have certainly had the best off seasons. You know, Washington lost 20 of 22 starters from that team that went to the national championship. They've got a new head coach, new quarterback, and basically knew everything else. Penn State's the interesting one. I think if you were to separate, you know, in 2024, the Big Ten into Tier 1 teams, Tier 2, Tier 3, and maybe you could have a fourth tier in there as well. I think Penn State is either bottom of Tier 1 or top of Tier 2. They have struggled getting over the hump. They don't play Oregon this year. They do play Penn State, and it is a home game, which is always going to be a tough place to go, though Ohio State has had success there before. So aside from Oregon and Ohio State, I look at Penn State as kind of the next team that's there. Michigan, I can't get behind their win total. Like, what? I know you're an Ohio State guy, so this may be coming from a place of mild bias there. But I look at Michigan and see that win total at 9.5. I think that's too high. They've lost so much from last year. Head coach, defensive coordinator, quarterback, running back, receivers. I don't see them as I see them as a good team. I don't see them as a title contender in the Big Ten.
You said 9.5, and I haven't looked at their schedule in a while, but last time I looked at it, it's brutal. It's a brutal schedule for Michigan in the upcoming year. I was thinking more 8-4. And for Sharon Moore, the one benefit that they have, I'm just going to be honest and not really care about the bias right now. He has done a phenomenal job of coaching up that offensive line. Especially last year, you lose one of your best offensive linemen. All of a sudden, the very next play, you guys score a touchdown against Ohio State. And the offensive line didn't seem like it lost a beat when their best guy went out. So that's a benefit. When you have a new coach in, you want to know, hey, can we win the battle in the trenches? Well, I would automatically try to say, yeah, check that box. You can do that. I'm not saying you will do that. But 9.5, even for betting, I'm not touching that, man. If I'm not going over, I'm going under because I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, so here are the games on their schedule that stand out. They're non-conference. This is an aberration for Michigan. They have a legitimate non-conference opponent, I think, for the first time in about a decade.
Crazy.
I know, it is actually legitimately crazy. And if you think I'm being too harsh on Michigan here, go look at their non-conference schedule over the last 3 years. It's a running joke. They canceled on UCLA for reasons that, clearly have worked out. They won the national championship. But they host Fresno State, Texas, and Arkansas State. They'll beat Fresno State in all likelihood, though the Bulldogs are always scrappy out of the Mountain West. Arkansas State, yeah, that's going to be a win. But they host Texas. They host USC. They have to go at Washington. FanDuel's got them as a big favorite there. They host Oregon. They host Michigan State. They go at Ohio State. So maybe that 9.5 number is baking in that their toughest games are coming at home. But I think 10-2 is kind of their ceiling. I think their floor is probably around 8-4. I don't think 7-5. I don't think they would pull back quite that hard. That would be like bottoming out. But when I come back to the Big Ten, I say I think I have Penn State in my mind as a better team in 2024 than Michigan.
Yeah, I am there with you. And I'm not a big Drew Aller guy. He hasn't really done a lot for me to say, yes, he is going to be a dude in college football. But you got to think, at least early on, he has the upper hand over, who is it, Alex Orji, who's going to be the starting quarterback for Michigan next year, at least as it stands right now at this point in the offseason. I'm not all in on the Wolverines. I do think, though, with Sherrone Moore, and if he can tap into some of that offensive success he had last year, being the offensive coordinator, and then use that for the entire team, yeah, maybe in a few years that might be better. I'm not thinking they'll win a national championship within the next decade. Now with the Ducks coming in, now with Ohio State, now with Penn State doing something with James Franklin where they're just steady. They're at the same level. They're not getting better. They're not getting worse. They're basically a 10-win team as the season starts.
High floor. One of the highest floor programs in all of college football. Their ceiling hasn't been, they haven't broken through that glass ceiling yet, but they are a high floor football team every single year.
10-2. Like, if I'm a college football coach and I can say, hey, going into any season, what do you expect it to do? Go 10-2 and go to a New Year's Six bowl. For most people, that's a win. Now, the 12-team playoffs is going to change a lot of that postseason stuff, but for most coaches, that's a win. The one thing that hurts James Franklin at Penn State, they're in the Big 10 with Ohio State and Michigan. They're not in the ACC. Literally, if they change conferences, they're going to the playoff multiple times. I am simply saying the Big 10 hurts Penn State. But hey, 10-2, like if you're doing that when the season starts, you're expected to only lose 2 games, and those being to Ohio State and Michigan, you're doing something right.
10-2 in the Big Ten should get you into the playoff just about every single year. Now, the other team that could kind of throw a wrench into all this is USC. I'm actually high. This is not going to go over well with Oregon fans, but this is just how I feel. I say my opinion. You don't have to always like it or agree with it, but this is how it is. I think USC is going to be very good next year. I don't know if they're winning the Big Ten, but here's the thing. I know they're going to be able to score points. I know they've got a good quarterback in Miller Moss, who scared off Ohio State transfer Will Howard, by the way. He was looking at coming from Kansas State to USC. Miller Moss balls out in the Holiday Bowl, goes for 400 yards and like 6 touchdowns, and he goes, I'm not going to compete with that guy. And Lincoln Riley says, yeah, I think Miller Moss scared off anybody who was interested in our program there. So I know they're going to be able to score points. They've hired D'Anton Lynn defensively. They've brought in starting caliber players on that side of the ball from other schools in the Pac-12. Kamari Ramsey, the safety from UCLA. They got a couple of guys from Oregon State. Bear Alexander's back on the defensive line. Like, they're going to have players. They're going to be better schematically, and I know they can score points. So USC is the other team, and I wonder what Wisconsin will do in year 2 under Luke Fickell as well. But, again, that feels like a program that hasn't broken through yet. Doesn't mean that they necessarily can't, but is Tyler Van Dyke the guy that's going to take them there? No, I'd take Oregon or Ohio State as it pertains to 2024. What about beyond 2024? Is it always going to be Oregon and Ohio State? We'll talk about that after we talk about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts, for your number one ride or die. Mine's sitting in my garage. I've had it for about 10 years now, and I'm never getting rid of it. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, Jay. So in 2024, I think it's Oregon and Ohio State. I think USC could maybe knock on the door. Penn State could knock on the door. I don't know if they'll get into that door. But going forward, Oregon and Ohio State, you look at the off seasons they have had, the way these teams recruit, the way they add transfer portal players. I think that these are the top two programs in the Big Ten going forward. You can certainly put Michigan in there. Washington, I think, can build up with Jed Fish, but who else do you look at and say, okay, they're going to contend in the Big Ten annually with Oregon and Ohio State?
Has to be USC. I know I'm not all in on Lincoln Riley and USC right now as far as for next season, but I would feel like I wasn't doing my job if I were to sit up here and say USC would not be a contender in the Big Ten beyond 2024, 25, 26, 27, all of those years after 2024 season is complete. You have so much talent in Southern California, and you are the brand, not a brand down there in SoCal. You are the brand down there. Now, you have people like Ohio State and others that are all around the country that want to go over there and to pull players out of your own backyard. But once Lincoln Riley gets this thing rolling over there in USC and people and the high school coaches and everybody really understands what he stands for, what he does, how he recruits and how he trains players, I do think USC is going to be one of those schools that down the road in a few years will be contending for a Big Ten championship. I'm not going to have bias, just being a great analyst here. Michigan is going to be there too. I'd feel stupid if I were to say Michigan would not be competing for Big 10 Conference championships, even though they've only won some recently. When Urban Meyer was there were some fierce battles the Buckeyes and Wolverines had with major conference championship ramifications happening with those games. So I got USC. We already talked about Oregon. They're definitely going to be there. I'm not that stupid to say they will not be. Michigan. I think Penn State has an opportunity too. If James Franklin finds a quarterback, like he is a quarterback and some stability running the ball and some of those things, but if he finds a quarterback, it's going to take a lot because Big Ten schools are bigger destinations for elite quarterbacks than Penn State. But if he can find a quarterback and some decent above average receivers, they could be in the running as well. I don't want to dismiss Washington. I don't want to dismiss Wisconsin for down the road. But look out for Nebraska. If they get this thing rolling, and if they get Raiola to do some things, the people say he plays like Patrick Mahomes. I don't know if he'll be that in college football, but if he plays like he did in high school and makes his game even better, it wouldn't shock me if in 2025 or 2026, Nebraska is playing in the Big 10 Conference championship game.
I love that pick because I think Wisconsin and Washington are in a similar place. You've got good, proven head coaches.
Yes.
2024 should be an above 500 year,
Correct.
but probably not a conference title contending year.
Correct.
But the next year, I feel like you could build to that if you make the right sorts of moves, particularly at the quarterback position. But the Nebraska thing is interesting. It's easy to forget they're in the Big Ten because they were in the Big 12 for a long time, and since going to the Big Ten, they've done nothing but lose one-possession games. That has been the Nebraska way. But here's the thing with the Cornhuskers. Is it a glamour program? No. Is it a huge recruiting brand? Not necessarily. But they've got a heck of a football coach, and they've got fantastic support. And so if they get rolling, that's a place that you can look at on your schedule and similar to Wisconsin, say, you know what? I don't know if they're the best team in the Big Ten, but I know that going into Madison, it is going to be a dogfight to get out of there with a win. And can they make noise? Absolutely. So USC's win total. Here's the thing that I always think about when you look at win totals. You have to factor in what the schedule looks like. Because a team that has a win total of 5.5 might actually be a 6.5 caliber team, but because they have this one tough game or a couple of tough stretches, or they have this game on the road or that game on the road, I think that could alter things. So Michigan, for instance, we were talking about their home road splits. They've got a bunch of big games, except for Ohio State, at the Big House. And I think that's factoring into their win total being 9.5. If you had one or two of those games that were on the road, it might be down at 8.5 or maybe even 7.5. I don't know. But when you're at home, that sort of stuff matters a great deal. And that brings me to USC. Their win total, according to our friends at FanDuel, is 7.5.
Ooh.
I love the over. I think,
dude, it's so easy.
That's what I'm saying.
Over.
That's what I'm saying is their win total. Let me double check it here because maybe it's gone up. You know, Colorado's opened at 4.5 and then it went up, but USC is still at 7.5 wins. I think that number's low, but I think it's reflective of how difficult their schedule is because their non-conference doesn't just have Notre Dame as it always does, who's going to be good. The game is at Memorial Coliseum in Los Angeles to end the regular season, but USC opens the season with LSU in Las Vegas at Allegiant Stadium in a neutral site game. That's what I'm saying, is they don't have an FCS opponent on their schedule. They've got Utah State the next week. They'll drub the Aggies out of the Mountain West, who are just a bowl team there, but they're not going to pull an upset of USC on the road. So I wouldn't worry about that in the slightest. But then their conference schedule, they open at Michigan. So their first three games are LSU, Utah State, bye at Michigan. That's the first month of the season for USC. And so if they go 2-1 in that stretch, I think they're doing great. If they go 3-0, they're a national title contender. I mean, full stop. Because like I said, offense is going to be there. D'Anton Lynn is going to do a good job defensively. He's a really good defensive coordinator. And he was just in a place in Los Angeles with UCLA where he had an offensive play calling head coach that Oregon fans know very well doesn't give a rip about defense. And he's now Ohio State's offensive coordinator. I'm talking, of course, about Chip Kelly. So the familiarity for D'Anton Lynn is there. It is rinse and repeat. It's, I'm the top defensive coach. The head coach is not in my ear about defense. I'm in charge of this. I'm in charge of player acquisition here on this side of the ball. I've got free reign. I have to do this because my head coach is all about offense there. I think that works, but they go at Michigan, then they host Wisconsin. That's not going to be an easy game either. So their schedule is just absolutely brutal, but I think they are better than that win total indicates.
Let me just go ahead and say this really quickly about the USC Notre Dame rivalry. I'm really happy they're still going to play it in the same way that they have been, middle of the season, end of the season, alternating locations and times of year that they're playing that game. I was one when I heard that USC was coming to the Big Ten. People were saying, oh, they might not be able to keep that rivalry intact. And I would have been shocked if they didn't keep that thing on their schedule. That win total was one that I'm sitting here like, wait, what? What's going on? But then when you tell me they got LSU neutral site, okay, they're closer to Vegas, but still neutral site, Utah State, a bye, and then on the road in the Big House, this makes me think this is back in the early to mid 2000s when that Michigan and USC would have been a big time deal, maybe bigger than it's going to be in the upcoming season. But man, that's brutal, man. That's really unfortunate. Like, you're leaving your conference in the Pac-12. Better competition, maybe. Not saying last year's Big Ten was the best.
No, last year's Pac-12 was better in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
It was deeper, at least. Obviously, the top teams, Michigan was better than Washington, but once you started going down the lineup there, the Pac-12 was deeper last year.
Oh, it was absolutely, and I'm not really a Big Ten guy. I'll say that here for you. We haven't really discussed this. I definitely prefer the SEC football over the Big Ten because outside of Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, sometimes the football play is pretty bad. I'm just going to get that out there right now. But no, if you're a USC fan listening to this or watching this and wondering, like, why are you guys so hard on USC? Wait till you go to the Big House and play a game. It's September, great. But at least the weather's not going to be snowy and cold or rainy and stuff like that. You'll see why it's going to be a big deal when they go there to Ann Arbor, Michigan, week 4 of the season. I mean, that's brutal, man. That's a brutal way to start your season, especially when you're playing in a new conference.
It is. And I'll just close with this. Long term, I think Lincoln Riley's a very good coach. He's made the right defensive coordinator hire finally, and I think their long-term projection is very good. We talk about Penn State and Wisconsin and Washington as well, maybe Nebraska getting up into that tier. I can't shake Iowa out of my head just because the defense is top 5, 10 in college football every year.
But what about that offense?
I know if they were ever to figure it out. What would it be? Like if they'd hired Chip Kelly as their offensive coordinator, what would they be in 2024? I don't know. I don't know. It's an interesting question, but just to put a bow on the USC factor here, just for 2024, the win total at 7.5. They could lose all of these games, all of them, which I don't expect them to, and still go over their win total as long as they don't have a stumble. LSU, neutral site, at Michigan, hosting Penn State, hosting Notre Dame. If they lose all of those games, they could still go over 7.5. So I think Jay and I are in lockstep agreement there. I'm fascinated to see what happens with USC. But back to Oregon and Ohio State, which we both agree are above where these teams are at right now. Can this ever become a rivalry? This is an important distinction. I hear this from Oregon fans quite a bit. We need to have a very clear understanding of what that means. You need to have a clear understanding of why FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. They've got everything you need. All the betting lines we talk about, the win totals, national championship odds, conference championship odds when they come out. This is all stuff that you can find over at FanDuel and so much more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. They're just trying to give you money. If you're a new customer, you put down a $5 bet and you win, just bet against the Blazers. That's free money right there because, yikes, you get $150 in bonus bets. So bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, all that and more. And all the college football stuff you need. Heisman, national championship, win totals, it's all over there too. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Oregon and Ohio State as a rivalry, this is very specific language here. So a rivalry implies that there is a deep and entrenched history between two teams that has led to it being an emotionally charged game for players, perhaps coaches, and certainly the fans. I do not look at Oregon, Ohio State and think that's a rival for Oregon. It is certainly one of the other conference contenders for the Ducks. I do not dispute that whatsoever. That's been the entire premise of this very show. But I liken it more to Oregon and Utah in the Pac-12 over the last couple of years. Big-time programs. Ohio State is bigger than Utah, obviously. But playing big-time games, always ranked games. You can have college game day in there. Oregon at Utah was college game day last year. Ohio State at Oregon, October 12th, probably college game day in 2024. For this to become an actual rivalry, Jay, I think something has to happen. You have to do more than just play in big and important games. Something's got to transpire. You got to have, maybe over the course of the next several years it could take place. I don't classify this as a rivalry. It's just a big-time matchup going into the Big 10 that is going to have Big 10 title and national championship and playoff implications every single year.
You know, when I thought about this topic and you mentioned it to me before, I laughed. I audibly laughed, and I laughed earlier. We mentioned the Blazers on accident. It just came out. I laughed because it doesn't make no sense. I know the English is bad. My mom, if she hears this, she'll say, Jay, speak better. But I use bad English for emphasis.
Your mom does that to you too?
Yeah, man. Yeah, she does. I'm 35 years old. My mom still does it.
My mom's relentless with that sort of stuff. She's more about the appearance, though. Like, if she watches a show and like my hair is off or something was off in my set, she'll text me, hey, did you see it? You need to do this or whatnot. She'll tune into one of my ESPN Plus broadcasts for Southern Utah. She'll be like, your tie is crooked. I'm like, okay. She does it all the time.
My mom's not that bad. No, I will say that. I'm just not that bad. However, don't have a crooked tie on TV. I'll just say that. I'll go that far.
That's the solution.
an easy solution. But no, it's funny. It's very funny. We're in 30 years of Penn. I'm going to use this comparison for Oregon fans that think this is crazy, that we're stupid. Penn State's been in the Big Ten for 30 years. They joined in the 90s. Not exactly sure exactly how long it's been. Many Ohio State fans don't view Penn State as a rival. Now, I think it's a little idiotic of them as well to not view Penn State for their reasoning. I think that Penn State's a closer rival for Ohio State than Oregon will be in the next 5 years, if that makes any sense. You talk about the history. The one thing that could make this a bigger matchup than just a big-time conference matchup, if you get Ryan Day and Dan Lanning to be there for 10 to 15 years, and they go back and forth, and the next thing you know, the Big Ten says, oh, you guys are playing every year. Like, we don't care about the distance. We don't care about the travel. Y'all playing every year. The next thing you know, it's, oh, this is more intense than normal. And then it may go into being like the SEC where they have thousands of rivals or all conference teams. It's only because they have been playing for 40, 50, 60 years. Coaches don't like each other. Towns don't like each other. Literally, it just means more for them down south. But I don't think it's a rivalry. It's too new. It's too new now. You talk about the emotion that's involved in it. Ryan Day is going to be a little upset, hopefully pissed off at the last time these two teams played in 2021.
What happened in that game, Jay? Refresh our memories.
No, I'll refresh the memories. Ohio State could not set the edge at all. It was bad. It was atrocious. CJ Stroud's second start, and it looked like, hey, he could do some good things.
He went for like 400. He went for over 400 yards passing in that game and lost at home.
You know what's weird? In the games where he loses, he has stupid numbers. Like against Michigan, his numbers aren't bad. Against Georgia, his numbers weren't bad. The team as a whole wasn't good enough on that day to win. But no, I don't want to remember that game. Actually, as we talk about it, I have a memory in my head of Jonathan Cooper not being able to set the edge, going right inside of him, and I believe he went for a touchdown late in the game. And oh gosh, bringing up old memories. Can we end this show now? Do we have to keep talking about this? I don't want to.
I got to tell you, we've had some tough luck in our rivalry games, the both of us recently. So I'm down to bring up anything in the past for football that evokes positive emotions. I could tell you everything about what I felt, what I did when Oregon pulled that statistical upset. At least it was about a 14.5 point line in Columbus. Kayvon Thibodeau didn't play. Once Thibodeau was out, I thought the game was done. I was like, oh, we're not going to get any pressure. Well, guess what? Oregon didn't get any pressure. They sacked him twice, and there was no pressure all game. He went for over 400 yards, and Oregon still somehow found a way to win. Let's wrap the show on this note, Jay. What would have to happen for Oregon, Ohio State to be considered a rivalry going forward? Because I'm in the same boat as you. It's a big game. It's an awesome matchup. It'll get a lot of television eyeballs and national attention. It'll have big implications and everything like that. But for it to feel different, for Oregon fans to have, the sort of disdain towards Ohio State fans they have towards Washington or Oregon State fans, what do you think would have to happen?
I do think they'll have to play every year. There's no divisions in the conference, so them playing every year is already going to make things bigger automatically. You mentioned GameDay being there. I don't really understand and know. Well, I don't know, not understand. I don't know what Oregon fans think about Big Noon, 12 noon Eastern time kicks, 9 a.m. local for them, because Big Noon's going to be there as well in numerous games, and it wouldn't shock me if the Ohio State-Oregon game is at 12 noon kickoff there on Fox. I wouldn't like that for you guys at all. I would definitely prefer a later in the afternoon kickoff for those on the Eastern Coast, maybe 12 noon there on the West, 12 noon on the West Coast. But you got to play every year, and I do think coaches staying there for a long time helps it. But let's just say there were 2 out of 3 years where these two schools play each other twice in a season, once in the regular season, once in the conference championship game. And let's say they play those basically 4 times. One time, Ohio State wins. It's got the conference. The next time, Oregon wins the conference. So regardless of the regular season result, you're now talking about two conference teams in the Big Ten that are really, really good, that are at the top, not just of the conference, but of the sport. And they're not just battling in the regular season and having all-time matchups, all-time games. They're doing it in the conference championship game as well. If you get that for a few years, that's going to piss off both fan bases. That's going to piss off the players on the teams. That's going to piss off the coaches. That's going to get the emotions rising, and that's going to raise the level of intensity on the field when these two teams meet. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't know. This is a new venture for the Big Ten to not have divisions, which I have been saying for years. Throw the divisions out the window. They don't mean anything. Let's just put your best two teams in the conference championship game because, one, it's going to be the most competitive game that you can provide at that point in the season. But then also, two, it makes more money. It makes a whole lot more money, which is why we have these games to begin with. But you got to have history. They have to play each other consistently. The Big Ten says, hey, no, you're not going to play every year. But that's going to lower the chance of this becoming a true rivalry in the sport.
Let's end on that note. About as well put as I think you could make it happen. Jay Stevens, Locked On Buckeyes. I'm Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On Ducks. This has been a special Locked On crossover edition. Appreciate everyone listening and watching. We'll see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And for my Oregon fans out there, as always, go Ducks.